This is Warbird Radio.
Hello and welcome to Warbird Radio. I'm Matt Jolly. We're talking today to Skipper Hyle from the Museum of the Forgotten Warrior. He's just down the road from me, and I've got to tell you, it's a great cause, and it's an interesting museum idea. Skipper, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Matt. Glad to be here.
So this is for the folks who never really got to where they wanted to be, which is a great idea. We're talking about flight instructors who serve stateside, perhaps a whole host of other career fields that a lot of people really never thought of. These are not necessarily folks who only served here, but perhaps folks who served here with the intent even of forward deploying during World War II. How did you come up with this
Well, it's a culmination of events. It started, somebody years ago got me a coffee table book on nose art. And there was a P-51D in the 334th Fighter Squadron, 4th Fighter Group that was named My Aching Back. And I had a bad back for years. And it was doing some further research. It was flown by a Second Lieutenant Don Lothar. And the airplane got one kill. And of course, it had the Vargas girl on the nose, and my aching back was actually about sitting for 8.5 hours on a seat pack parachute to Berlin and back. And Lieutenant Lothar only got his one kill as a ground kill in April of 1945. And it kind of dawned on me, there's enough glamorous Glennis's and Old Crows and stuff like that, Mustangs that were for the famous aces. But Lieutenant Lothar did his part too. And backing up a lot, I used to, when I was 17, I was working for a place that did a daily air show at King's Dominion. And one of the guys that flew the Stearman, two Stearmans that we had in an aerobatic act, had joined the Navy to fly Hellcats off Essex-class carriers and shoot down Japanese. And he earned his wings, and the Navy said, "But we need you here." So for 3 years, he was a primary instructor in Stearmans at Pensacola. Never got sea duty, never got a campaign ribbon, never even got within 5,000 miles of an enemy aircraft. And I ran into a guy before I went in the Air Force, again, 1,000 years ago, and I had a PT-26 at the time. And so, I was in the Navy in World War II. Great, what'd you do? I was an aviation carpenter's mate. And for those of you who don't understand Navy rank real quick, you have a pay rate, which should be like petty officer, third class or something like that. And then you have a job, which would be your rating. And in his case, he was an aviation carpenter. And never having heard of that, I asked him, well, what does that do? He said, I spent 3 years building Stearman wings at Pensacola. Again, never got a sea duty, never got a campaign ribbon, but those two guys won the war just like everybody else. Because without them, we would have run out of Stearmans. Without them, we wouldn't have trained enough pilots. And probably on a more personal note, we were 4 days from leaving for Desert Storm when I was flying F-16s in Japan. And I still remember briefing to fly about 7:15 in the morning when there was an announcement that flying was canceled for the day. And at 0900, there will be a meeting of all pilots in the wing auditorium. So we all gathered up, knowing we're leaving. And the wing commander walked out on the stage to the mic and said, "You're not going, unpack, dismissed," and turned around and walked off. And we all sat there with our mouths hanging open, looking at each other, going, the only game in town, and we don't get to dress out. And as our vice wing commander said, well, you can tell your grandson that you protected Northern Honshu from killer whales and polar bears during the Great Desert Storm. Now, granted, our secondary mission was to keep Kim Jong-il in place, who had already made an announcement he was going to use this current political unrest to unite the Korean Peninsula. So, yeah, we did something, but it wasn't going downtown to Baghdad, which we had trained, our entire careers for. So all of those things put together got me to thinking that this would be a good idea to explain to people that there were millions of guys involved in World War II that never even got close to a shot fired in anger. But their piece of the war was part of the wheels and the grease that kept it going. And without them, there wouldn't have been the frontline guys that were engaged in combat, the guys who shot down 28 airplanes or 40 airplanes in the Pacific, or whatever it was. Part of my narration from my airshow routine, the summer of 1941, the Army Air Corps had about 175,000 people. In the summer of 1944, that was 2.3 million. All of those guys had to be trained, they had to be fed, they had to be clothed, they had to have the equipment to do what they were going to do, and they had to keep the train running. And that's what happened, and that's what I want to try to educate people about with this museum.
Well, and you're doing a good job of it. I mean, not only do you have a physical location in Luthersville, but you also have two aircraft that go out and tell this story to a broader audience at aerial events across the U.S. Let's talk about that just for a moment, because is it the 90th anniversary of the Stearman this year?
That's what I understand. Actually, of the KDAT, Stearman's, Lloyd Stearman, before he got bought by Boeing, was making other airplanes, sport aircraft, and also a few mail planes designs to compete with, like the Pitcairn and the Boeing 40B4. But the PT-17 is my understanding that this is the 90th year of that model.
Gotcha. So the 90th year of a whole variety of aircraft that were designed in that capacity. But you have one, and you've just started a new routine with it. Tell us how that's going, because it's kind of a neat idea, and I don't know of another stock Stearman routine that's out there right now.
Well, people ask me, I got a stock Stearman, and like, oh, you're going to do what John Moore does? Nobody is going to do what John Moore ever did in the Stearman. What I do is trying to teach a history lesson. And actually years ago, and another air show announcer, Hugh Oldham, you explained to me that don't try to explain what you're doing as far as the flying and the aerobatic routine, because quite frankly, most of the people listening to it won't understand it. Tell them a story instead. So what I try to do is go up and recreate what would have been a final phase check in both the Stearman, and I do the same thing in the Harvard when I fly that, of what these guys would have had to do in order to complete the phase and move on through pilot training. And one of the points that I bring up in the narration is, no matter what you flew in World War II, C-47s, B-17s, P-51s, or even with the Navy side, Hellcats, Corsairs, PBYs, the first airplane that you would have flown, more than likely, because there were a few other types out there, would have been a Stearman. And if you didn't get through this, you went no further. So this was the first step that everybody took to earn those wings, no matter if they were silver or gold.
Well, it's a great story, and it's one that is worth telling. Let's talk about your Stearman just a little bit. 565 was a family project by you and your sons and your wife. What do you know about it?
The actual serial number that I have was based at Tulare Field in California. That was part of the Rankin Aeronautical Academy. Tex Rankin was a world aerobatic, or at least a U.S. aerobatic champion before World War II. And he was one of the guys that Hap Arnold, chief of the Air Corps, knowing that he didn't have the infrastructure to train the thousands of pilots he was going to need, made contracts with civilian instructors in schools like Spartan School Aeronautics, Embry-Riddle, I think UND, University of North Dakota was part of that. Tex Rankin was part of that. And they were to do primary flight training. So they took civilian instructors, typically older guys that wouldn't have been eligible for the military draft, and they taught primary. Now, they had a military check section that would have administered the check rights to the kids. And once they got through that phase, they moved on to another one. And further as you got into it, you had more and more actual military, to the point where you were flying with military instructors. It was a solid military event at an air base. But in the beginning, there were so many people. Rankin Aeronautical Academy trained 10,000 guys in World War II. And that's from 1941 to, I think they stopped. My memory's fading me. I believe it was the late winter of 1945. So February, March kind of time frame. The contract was let is that we have enough pilots and you can stop now. So there were lots of people that went through there. Like I said, 10,000 of them. Dick Bong was one of them, who later on became the ace of aces. He graduated very early and would not have flown my airplane. About the only guy that anybody ever heard of that could have flown my airplane was Jack Webb. If anybody remembers Dragnet, Sergeant Joe Friday, that's the guy. And unfortunately, he washed out of Class 44D. There's some debate of whether he was given a hardship discharge by the Red Cross because his parents were ill, or he just washed out of pilot training. But he could have flown my airplane. And she's been restored to exactly as she looked. She showed up there in July of 43. And this is what she looked like. The tech order would have changed, and it was silver. Also, they were painted silver by then. And techs, because if you've ever been in the San Joaquin Valley, there's kind of a perpetual haze. So a silver airplane in a hazy condition is not very visible. So he put a yellow band around the fuselage and yellow chevron on the top wing, and we've recreated that. It has her actual serial number on it. The only thing I could not find, mostly because I didn't want to spend about 8 months at Maxwell Air Force Base going through little 3x5 index cards, is what the true buzz number would have been on the side. So 565 is actually the tail number of my F-16. And I cheated a little bit on that, and figured, we'll use that.
There you go. There you go. All right. Well, and the rivet counters can worry about that. Maybe someone will find it. Is it painted on? Yeah.
Let me know if you do. Yeah, that would be great.
Because I'm guessing it's not paint.
No, it's most of this is vinyl stick on. We did also put nose art. My Harvard is called Jay's Bird. There's lots of Johns in my family, and we didn't need. And my oldest is named John, but saying "Hey John" didn't work very well because about 7 guys would turn their head. So we just call him the letter J, and he goes by that. So the Harvard is called Jay's Bird. When Matt was about 4. He was aware enough to, how come my brother has an airplane and I don't? And I came up on the spot. Well, if we get another one, we'll call it Matt's Bat. And that's what we named the Stearman. So we put a little nose art on the front with the M is sort of a Art Deco bat and Matt's Bat. So that would not have been there in World War II, and the buzz number is not correct. But outside of that, it's as authentic as I could make it.
I think it's a great idea, and I think it tells a wonderful story, too, all the way around, even with your number on it, sort of tying that in. It's a great story, and you have the nice, I should say, makings of a museum there in Luthersville. It's open by appointment. If folks want to come and visit, they can. And you have some interesting projects. What's going on in the hangar right now, Skipper?
Well, we decided we needed ground transportation, so we acquired a Jeep, which I'm in the middle of putting all back together and rebuilding. It had been pretty much buried up to the bottom of the seats in mud for a number of years, and so lots of new bearings and all the soft lines and the hard lines, brake and fuel and stuff. Transmission's locked up, engine needs to be taken apart and overhauled. And I'm hoping by, this time next year, we'll have the ability to maybe participate at other events besides air shows like, 4th of July parades and that sort of thing. I am specifically, again, neat little things that you find when you look around enough. There's a YouTube video of the 51st Fighter Squadron in Korea of F-86s taxiing out of Suwon, and at the end of the runway, there's a flight surgeon in his Jeep, which is marked flight surgeon, and my wife happened to be a flight doc. I mean, going back to your original question, the fighter pilot husband protected Northern Honshu. Meanwhile, my flight doc wife is the decorated war hero of the family, who was actually in Kuwait in Saudi Arabia during Desert Storm, and has actually logged combat time, which I never did. And that tickled the Red River Rat Fighter Pilot Association to death when we both joined, because she had the combat time and then could recommend me, who didn't have the combat time. So we're making it a flight doc's Jeep. And again, another support function, if you want to call it that was required to keep the wheels turning. People rarely think about how much it takes to get one bullet from the factory all the way to the barrel of the gun where it gets fired. And there's a lot of people involved in that. And that's kind of the point of the museum.
I think it's a great idea. We're gonna change gears when we come back from the break. We're gonna talk about air shows. And,
okay.
I've got some questions here for you. But the website, the word "the," and then MOFW, the Museum of the Forgotten Warrior.com. We're gonna quick link it into the show story, so it's nice and easy to find. Quick commercial break. More with Skipper when we come back.
This is Warbird Radio. Reminding you that radio engines don't leak oil. They just mark their territory. This is Warbird Radio. Tune in. Take off.
And welcome back here to Warbird Radio, one of the summer episodes here. You've noticed, we dial back a little bit in the summer because a lot of you are out and about and you're not, you're doing stuff, going to air shows and whatnot. A lot of owner-operators listen to this show, and I'm glad that you're here. If anybody would love to support it, there is a tip jar now on Warbird Radio, because we don't sell a lot of advertising. The site is not laden with advertising. If you want to sponsor the show, we'd be glad to talk to you. Pretty easy to do. Let's talk now to Skipper Hyle, because a question that I get at least, 3 or 4 times a year, it seems like, from just Warbird people, is how do I build an air show routine around an airplane that, it's not loud, it doesn't have a lot of smoke, it's not an afterburning jet. How do I do this? And you sort of touched on this, Skipper. You've just done this. So if folks have a T-34 that they want to start campaigning or something else, what's your recommendation?
Well, of course, you need a statement of aerobatic competency, and ICAS and Warbirds of America will help with all of that. You can go to either of those places and download the ACE manual and find out what physically you have to do and what training's required, plus the check ride with an aerobatic competency evaluator to be qualified for the FAA. You'll start at 800 feet, and you have to fly a certain number of shows to 500 feet, then a certain number of shows to get down to 250, and then it's a much bigger deal to get level 1. I flew at 250 for years just because I used to live at 500 feet and 540 knots or 480 knots, depending on what we were doing, and didn't feel the need to go down there. And they were about to make it, much more difficult. You required 2 aces, you required a recommendation, you required all the other stuff. Well, of course, you also have to understand, I believe the current count is there's only 298 people with statements of aerobatic competency in the country right now. So we're a pretty small family, and some of those are flip-flops and some of those are Warbirds. So it gets even smaller when you talk about what you're flying. There are, everybody. So before the change was made, I decided that, and I got some advice from another good friend of mine who's been doing this for years and years and years. Just because you have a surface level, you don't have to go down there. And yeah, he's right. And another buddy of mine told me you'll find it a lot easier because at 250 feet, you're tied to a needle on your altimeter. When you have surface level, you're tied to your peripheral vision. And when the trees start getting too big, you just go the other way. And he's right. Believe it or not, the same kind of thing. I used to fly a P-51 Mustang, and everybody, you'll be surprised what it's like. And a T6 is harder to fly than a Mustang. I didn't believe that till I did it, but it is. And a Stearman is not so much harder, but maybe it's difficult in a different way than a T6. It's a lot lighter loaded. The gear's narrower. It's a lot higher. So the feel of the airplane is a little bit more difficult. Mustang's the easiest one of the three. And so if you have something, whatever it may be, and you decide that you'd like to offset your expenses and a little bit, because you're not gonna make a living doing air shows. There's not enough money there. Put together a routine that you can. Get some advice from other guys who do this. Go on places like YouTube and there's a TV group, Matt, Airshow 360, I think is their name now. They seem to have changed it a little bit, and they have videos of Warbird air shows, and kind of see what other guys do. One of the difficulties here, we are not flying flip-flops. These airplanes basically do loops and rolls and combinations thereof, as it says on my statement of aerobatic competency. T6 is even placarded against spinning. So you can't do that. In fact, the Stearman's the first airplane that I'd had the opportunity to fly in something like 25 years. I could do spins and snaps in it again. And so you're kind of limited, and you have to put together a routine. You don't want to take too long in between maneuvers because people want to see you and have you in front of them. And, after that, you just have to play with it. It took me 2.5 years to get my smoke system the way I wanted it, where I was actually putting out that, big brown white T6 smoke that we're known for. And it took me another year, probably with the Stearman, to get a halfway decent smoke system, and I'm still playing with that one. So it's going to take time. You're going to have to start at 800 feet, which that's going to turn off some promoters because, well, you're way up there. But I got it. Everybody has to start somewhere. So
let's talk about the. I don't want to disrupt your third here.
Sure, go ahead.
I don't want to disrupt your train of thought here as I get tongue tied. Talk about the process though, because it's not all that long to move down, so to speak. I mean, you're moving up, I guess, if you're moving down. But let's talk about that, because there is a set period of time, and so many shows flown, and then reevaluated and whatnot. But it's not like this is a 20-year process.
No, you ought to be able to basically go from 800 to 500 to 250 in 3 years. It's a very small number of shows, and Saturday is one show, Sunday is another show. So you see how that the count would rapidly add up. And you can also use some practices to substitute for shows. And quite frankly, I'd have to look at the ACE manual to tell you the numbers, because otherwise I'd probably get it wrong, and that would mess everybody up. So no, it's not that hard. And as you get out there and people see you and they learn how close you are, it becomes easier and easier and easier. Now, one of the odd things that I found about this is, those of you that don't understand Georgia, I have several air shows that are literally within 40 minutes flying time of where I am. And I won't get invited to those. But for 20 years, I have been doing a show in Geneseo, New York, which is 790 miles away. And basically have been told I will be doing that show until I'm no longer married to my current wife, which is another long story that we won't get into. But, for 20 years, I've been flying to upstate New York, and I can't get a show 40 minutes away from me.
Yeah, but that's the story of the business, right? I mean, that's just...
Everybody runs into that, and nobody understands it. but that's the way it works, it seems like. And, just get used to it. If that's where you're going to go, expect things like this to happen, and don't let it bother you. Just keep on moving, and you'll find shows. Take them where you can get them. There are certain issues with every airplane. A T6 only goes so fast, a Stearman goes slower. So you may find yourself limited by where you want to be. I got a buddy of mine who flies a flip-flop who routinely goes out west, Colorado, Wyoming, Idaho, and that sort of thing. That'd take me a week in a Stearman. So no, I won't book the show because you can't afford me to pay me what it's going to cost me to get out there. So I just don't do it. And, again, as I said before, nobody's going to make a living on this. I was an airline pilot. I did that for 25 years and I retired 4 years ago. And yes, I left early. I'm not 69 by the math by now. And I got, because of my seniority, 18 days off a month and I could do air shows. Now I'm retired and I have a retirement and I don't need to fly air shows, but it does pay for the airplane.
And
you're for the museum.
I started saying it fulfills the need of the museum. The other thing I wanted to bring up here is that we're in kind of an interesting time where there are so few of these airplanes left in the air. I mean, we've seen in the last 10 years sort of the dwindling, if you will, of a major aircraft type. I mean, where there were once 10 or 12 in the U.S. that were capable of flying, now we just have a handful. So lots of things ebb and flow in this, but we're at a point where even a mobile museum that might have a trailer component, that might have an aircraft on display, some way to get these aircraft out there, or a rides program, any of this stuff is possible, and would just encourage you, like Skipper, to kind of find your niche, because I think it's a great idea and an easy way to help the aircraft pay for at least some of those expenses. So good stuff.
You just mentioned a trailer component. Quite frankly, Matt, I had never thought of that until right then. And that's not a bad idea.
Towed with a Jeep. There you go.
Yeah, no, I don't. Yeah. Don't laugh, guys. Those few people that are listening, you'd be surprised where ideas come from, and sometimes they just hit you like that. That's not a bad idea at all.
Well, the point is to get you out there. I mean, right, and you're trying to tell a broader story. You can have a mobile museum trailer with artifacts. You see that a lot at these it's shows around the state that have artifacts, historic artifacts that you find just around. Whether it's Native American stuff and that's a great way to display it at an event, right? It's easy. You don't have to take it off the walls, and there you go.
Well, I believe Red Tail, the
sure.
American Air Force C model P-51 does that, and of course the Berlin Airlift didn't have a trailer; they had a C-54
and the whole
fuselage. You walk through one side and walk out the other, R1 door, I think it was, and all the fuselage was a flying museum about the Berlin Airlift. So, that's a great idea, Matt. I'll have to think about that.
You're going to go buy a trailer now. All right, Skipper, come back on anytime, and I'm looking forward to seeing you at a show real soon. You're headed to St. Louis and then Geneseo, New York. In between that, a show in Wisconsin. And we'll send people to your website, also Facebook, Instagram, social media stuff. Skipper's on there as well. But Skipper, thanks for being here. Glad to have you.
Glad to be here, Matt. Thanks. Appreciate it.
All right. We'll hopefully get together soon. We are neighbors, not too far apart. So,
yeah. All righty.
Skipper Hyle, everybody, from the Museum of the Forgotten Warrior. You can check him out online and, of course, on social media. But even better than that, go see him at a show. Geneseo, just around the corner for him, as well as St. Louis, Missouri. Talk soon.
This